Thank you. It's wonderful to come after such an inspiring set of presentations covering so much, some key points that are even just starting to bubble out at the moment. Phil's point about, I think, 40,000 vacant homes in Scotland. In Ireland, that figure is 200,000. So just to give you a sense of some of the scale of the challenges that we're facing here in Ireland. And then I think picking up on Leslie's point about social inclusion and also the cross-cutting nature of participatory work in towns, and how without changing that whole systemic joining of the dots, some of those long-term structural problems are going to remain. So my job here in the last of these presentations is just to share a little bit about CFIT, which is UCD Centre for Irish Towns, that we've been developing over the last year. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what CFIT is. Hopefully that's sharing, is it? What we felt the need for it was, our key research themes, and just about the shape of CFIT as it's emerging. Yeah.
There's a black screen for us, Orla.
Resume share. Yeah. Is that working now? Okay, I'm going to just do it this way.
Yeah,
okay.
There you go.
Is that okay?
100%.
So firstly, what is the UCD Centre for Irish Towns? Well, it's, again, picking up on Leslie's point, it's a transdisciplinary centre for research and training in UCD, focused on the towns on the island of Ireland. We started work on it in 2019. We had some support from the Strategic Priority Fund and the UCD Earth Institute, and that allowed us a little bit of space and a small budget to begin looking at the shape of it, and allowed us to apply for the official university accreditation as a recognised centre. So we've just been recommended for approval by that, and it should happen within the next month or so. The aim of CFIT is to support the emergence of thriving and resilient towns for sustainable communities. And that is quite timely at the moment because of the government's developing town centre first policy, which was one of the key actions under our new programme for government, which is a year old now. So that process is underway, and we're part of that. We're advising into that town centre first policy development. CFIT aims to bring together a broad range of disciplines, not just within academia, but also stakeholders outside of universities to collaborate on societal changes as they relate to towns on the full island of Ireland. At the moment, we have two co-directors, myself and Philip Crowe, and we've got a support from a really great active working group and an advisory board. But just to say, we've no formal funding at the moment, so that's going to be one of our key tasks, to try to establish and fund research as we go forward. We're actively seeking ways to build research teams around 7 research themes that we've identified through co-created workshops within UCD, but also collaborative workshops that we've run with Trinity, Queen's, and obviously this webinar and our ongoing conversations with the University of Edinburgh builds on an aim to expand that internationally and build on the existing UCD University of Edinburgh Memorandum of Agreement. Sorry, share this. Just 1 second. Yeah. Why does this? Oh, there you go. So what is the need for, why did we set this up? What's the need for a research centre focused on Irish towns or for towns? And I think, as was Phil mentioned earlier, Ireland, very similar to Scotland, is a nation of towns. 2/3 of the population of the country either live in or are dependent on towns. And they have a potential to facilitate sustainable development and play a big role in decarbonisation. And with Europe's aim to decarbonise the continent by 2050, that's a massive challenge. However, despite this, many Irish towns are in decline, and they face several cross-cutting challenges, including very long-term ongoing vacancy issues, lack of investment in physical and social fabric, resilient infrastructure and amenities, lack of innovation in relation to digitisation, broadband, work patterns, mobility. That has changed somewhat over the pandemic, which becomes a kind of an interesting thread into what might happen. There's, as has been pointed out by other presentations this morning, there's huge gaps in data, in knowledge and in skills relating to towns. And overall, I suppose there's a lack of joined up thinking and system-based approach to governance, to policy implementation and funding. We have a huge amount of policy in Ireland that broadly relates to towns, but nothing that's targeted, and very little delivery of the actions of that policy on the ground. So what are the opportunities? Ireland has a national planning framework and a plan towards 2040. And that plan says that by 2040, Ireland is going to have an additional 1 million people on the island. And there is, I think, as Malcolm was saying and Phil was saying, that there's received wisdom that the cities are going to take up this growth. And that cities is where things are happening. But that narrative is slowly changing. And our cities are also already struggling to provide the infrastructure needed for demographic growth. So towns have an opportunity to take up some of that growth, and to do so in a way that allows the towns to thrive, and to do so in a way that can be low carbon. And this is only just really beginning to become realized within Ireland, but there's a growing, I would say, conversation and growing awareness of the scale of the challenge that represents. So how do we go about doing this? So going back to CFIT, through the collaborations that I described earlier, we began by trying to identify key research areas, and they linked to the Sustainable Development Goals. Of course, there's Goal 11, which is probably the most overarching goal, but within that, the themes also relate to many others of the SDGs. So the themes that we've identified so far, and these are developing, are understanding of our towns, respecting for our heritage and culture, supporting resilient and sustainable communities, promoting inclusive and innovative economies, design for resilient infrastructure, championing nature-based solutions, and promoting open and participatory democracies, and ensuring inclusive and fair decarbonisation pathways. The rough shape of the centre, which we tried to kind of map out, relates to those themes, and then will try to identify teams that can act in relation to those themes on identified projects. So they might be in terms of funded PhDs or identified funding streams, and ideally consist of PIs and a research team. And that might be within UCD or in collaboration with other universities or with outside stakeholders as well. We also are very keen that this is part of our teaching and learning strategy. CFIT is based in APEP, which is the School of Architecture, Planning and Environmental Policy, but then will expand to include several other disciplines as can be folded into it. So the teaching and learning spans from undergraduate level through to research, masters, PhDs, and we also see an opportunity to extend that to CPD, because as Ali has noted, there is a lack of training to upscale, for example, the CTHC program, and several other, how do we count carbon within local authorities? How do we bring those skills outwards? We're partnering with, we can identify several partner relationships between government departments. And I mentioned we're on the advisory group for the government's Town Centre First policy development, our regional assemblies, our local authorities, the Heritage Council and other agencies, but also the European Commission. And I think there's potential there through the new European Bauhaus project, partner universities within Ireland and also internationally. So potential projects might, for example, and these are rough sketches of projects that might happen or some that are in development, they might be to do with water infrastructure in towns. So Philip Crowe and Sarah Cotterill are looking at a project to do with water infrastructure, but also linking that to vacancy. Thinking about unpacking the car and measuring the impact of car parking and car dominance and mobility. Funding for towns more structurally, how does funding for towns and the impact of that funding for towns compare in different countries? So learning from knowledge bases internationally, and how can we learn from that? Designing for life, adaptation strategies for existing buildings and towns. One of our large banks, for example, Bank of Ireland, is closing branches in, I think, 30 towns in Ireland, which is going to have a huge effect on those towns, but also makes you think, what would those buildings be used for in the future? The desire factor, understanding what makes places desirable or not, and what are those kind of key metrics? How do we measure that, and how do we think about designing and being creative in relation to those challenges? So they're just some of the kind of nascent projects we're thinking about. And then what are we working on as a working group? I suppose as I said, we're identifying gaps in the knowledge and data in Irish towns, and what are those emerging themes? We're trying to build a network of researchers in UCD and other Irish universities and internationally. We're trying to develop those teaching and learning delivery and partnerships at the levels that I mentioned, identifying the gaps in practical CPD courses to address them, connecting with partners in government, in outside agencies and civil society who are active in policy and action in towns, and trying to identify key research projects that we might meaningfully be able to input into. And as I said, we've two of our members have applications for the IRC Coalesce for funding applications at the moment under the CFIT banner. Connecting with international partners, both in academia, government or policy related to towns, and sharing best practice, and contributing to policy formation, in Ireland, implementation of EU programmes and directives, which would include the new European Bauhaus, SEA directives, and the EU Green Deal. And our long-term goals really are to, echoing what everybody's saying today, is to support the co-creation of vibrant, resilient communities that are socially cohesive and inclusive, that improve the quality of life for people living in towns. So how can we do that as a research centre? Well, we can aim to provide evidence-based research and data and contribute to knowledge and understanding of what makes our towns great or not. We can try to use that knowledge to support a just transition to low carbon economy and society, and to do so in a creative way. We can promote an all-Ireland approach that supports policymakers and gives government departments the evidence that they need to make good policy. We can collaborate with researchers, policymakers, local government and community stakeholders nationally and internationally to share knowledge, and hopefully build excellent teaching and learning capacity and partnerships on towns that recognise that cross-cutting nature and the transdisciplinary nature of everything to do with towns. So that's where we are today. I hope I haven't run too much over my 10 minutes.